Very warm welcome as you join us on today's episode of Tax Matters. My name is Pearl Namaka.
And I'm Chiamaka Ohawuchi. Thank you for joining us.
Do you have issues with your withholding tax credit?
Do you have concerns over the acquisition of tax clearance certificates?
How would you feel being in the same room with the #1 taxman in Nigeria, discussing issues one-on-one, having your concerns addressed on the spot?
That and more is what you get on today's episode of Tax Matters.
Today's episode of Tax Matters is a bumper episode. We're going to transport you into the venue of the 48th Annual Accountants Conference, which was held in Abuja from the 2nd to the 5th of October 2018, in such a way that you would think you were present at the event.
The Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, ICAN, is the body recognized by law for the registration and regulation of the accountancy profession in Nigeria.
Every year, ICAN brings together accountants from all over Nigeria under one roof to fraternize, to review the practice of the profession, and to strategize for the future. From the 2nd to the 5th of October 2018, ICAN held its annual Accountants Conference in Abuja, Nigeria's Federal Capital Territory. Several topics were discussed in the course of the 4-day event, and of course, taxation was a major item on the menu. Of course, you know that accountancy and taxation are like Siamese twins, and who better to lead a discussion on taxation than the Executive Chairman, Federal Inland Revenue Service, Mr. Babatunde Fowler. Topic was tax justice, expanding the frontier of public finance. The session was presided over by foremost accountant and tax practitioner, Mr. Emmanuel Ijewere, who began by pouring encomiums on Mr. Fowler.
When I do right, any top government official, including senators, and it's a very serious issue on which I feel very strongly, I attach to it the kind of tax clearance certificate that Mr. Fowler created in Lagos State. I send it to them because I'm proud that I have a right to challenge you because I've paid my taxes. And if you are in this hall, you should try to do that yourself, believe in that yourself, and do the right thing. Because from the time I was in my previous world of tax practice, I observed that it's only a small group of people that were paying the taxes. And many of these people were forced to pay the right taxes because the concentration was on them. But when this government came on board and they appointed the tax guru of Lagos, who had exemplified himself in the act of ensuring you pay correct taxes, Mr. Fowler, I said something new is going to happen. And a lot has happened. We will not spend time and energy discussing issues that are outside what Mr. Fowler, who is the lead paper presenter, will be discussing. His job is to look at the law and collect the taxes as provided by law. How the money is spent is outside his purview. If you as chartered accountants and citizens of Nigeria don't care how that money is spent, then go back and return your certificates.
With that said, the paper presenter, Mr. Fowler, mounted the stage.
Without taxation, we cannot talk about development. Africa, as a continent, is set to host 30% of the world's natural resources. but still remains the poorest continent. The Agenda 2063, the AU claims that by then we should be in a position to fund our respective budgets. And my position clearly is that I don't think the developed world will continue to carry us. We have to be able to develop our country ourselves. So even if we choose the best leader without resources cannot bring anything to be, apart from having a vision which will end up being a dream. When we're talking about tax justice, I'm not a lawyer, but I'll try and define it the best way possible. It's a fair system of taxing. Simply put, a fair system of taxing. Meaning that as tax administrators, we'll not expect you to pay more tax than you should. And you, as taxpayers, we expect you to pay your taxes as when due. On the part of the tax administrator, we'll try and make it convenient. We'll certainly be held accountable and give you all the information that you require, plus all the education that you require to ensure that you can carry out your own side of the deal. I was very happy when the chairman pointed out our responsibility is not to spend the money or to question how the money is being spent. You and I elected the officials that carry out that executive function of spending the tax revenue.
Tax justice, a fair system of taxing. Mr. Fowler spoke at length about how the FIRS has been walking the talk, how the service has been ensuring that the taxpayer gets a fair deal all the time.
We at FIRS have adopted a new system. We do not believe in what we call armchair tax administration. We meet with stakeholders on a regular basis. We try and explain our vision, try and explain the process that we have introduced. And after we find out that if for any reason we hit a roadblock, then we come out with what we call the enforcement aspects. And I'll talk about some certain things that we have put into place and why we had to take those measures.
These measures include leading efforts aimed at increasing Nigeria's tax-to-GDP ratio by ensuring that tax collections from the non-oil sector exceed collections from the oil sector, bringing the informal sector into the tax net, the introduction of e-services for tax transactions.
Of course, these have led to exponential increases in tax collection across board, and where persuasion has failed, the FIRS has had to adopt enforcement.
Every day, my people dey for work. Some dey do office work, some get them own business. So all of them want good road, constant power for better life. Whether na office work, oh yeah. Pay your tax. Whether na your own business, oh. Pay your tax. If you want a better life, oh. Pay your tax. Na your civic responsibility. Pay your tax. Better soup, na money cook am, oh. Oh yes. Nothing goes for nothing, my brother. If you want potable water, security and hospital for make life jolly.
That's right. Good roads, good hospitals, portable water, adequate security all come from taxpayers' money. Play your part in making Nigeria great. Everybody, small scale, big companies, entrepreneurs, do the right thing. Pay your tax. This message is from the Federal Inland Revenue Service, FIRS.
Mr. Fowler's paper was well received. The paper was discussed by the trio of Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, Mr. Olumide Obayemi, and Mr. Ruben Orwaru.
It's tax injustice for you to demand social services when you haven't paid taxes. So you must pay on time and pay correctly. Government must ensure that they use that revenue for the purpose of the people. It is not enough to spend the money for the people. It must be priority that impacts on the people. Don't go and build a golf course because you like to play golf when there's no road in your state. Don't go and build an airport because you like to fly and your family when there's no road, there's no primary school. So beyond being a legal obligation, tax is also a civic duty, so we must be willing to pay. Our government must set the tone from the top, and we need to have taxpayer advocacy, where government will say, let's listen to the taxpayers and pay attention to what they're saying, and we must ensure accountability and transparency. I do like to say always that tax is never a standalone issue. You cannot talk about taxation without talking about the economy, because tax is how government collects a fraction from the prosperity of businesses and of individuals. If individuals and businesses are struggling, you can audit them from now until kingdom comes and you will not get anything out of it. The electronic tax system, I would like to commend the FRS and the Joint Tax Board for making Nigeria one of the countries where you can say, well, I can pay taxes from the comfort of my home, which is good. One thing I'd like to mention, though, is I want us to move away quickly from the efforts that we have put in, which we commend. Let's start focusing more on the outcome and impact. How many of our taxpayers are now filing returns online? How easier that process is compared to the manual process we used to have. Can we even quantify the savings to them? And let's continue to engage with the people so that we can even continue to improve this process.
Tax justice demands that the taxpayers who pay the tax should see the result of the taxes they are paying. If they are not, then the taxes are not being justified. They are not justified, and they should not be collected.
Another discussant, Mr. Ruben Owaru from Kenya, spoke about smooth communication between tax authorities and taxpayers.
Paying greater attention to facilitating communication between the taxpayer and the revenue authorities. As a matter of fact, this week I received a text and an email from my tax revenue authority back in my country, Kenya, the Kenya Revenue Authority. We have this week what we call customer service week. I don't know whether it is happening here as well. So because in the spirit of customer service, the tax authority in Kenya wrote me an email and said, Mr. Ruben Owaru, we appreciate the partnership that we've had with you over the periods. We wish you well, even in the coming days, as you also partner with us in developing Kenya. So we are moving towards what we are calling collaboration between the tax authorities and the taxpayers themselves. So besides enforcement measures, then collaboration measures is something that we need to keep an eye on. Providing opportunities for correction and prevention, and even reminding us, you don't have to wait until someone, has gone past the due date or the deadline, and then you slap them with, a tax penalty. Is there a mechanism in place reminding you whether you are supposed to be paying your tax or the due date is approaching?
In Nigeria, we also have Tax Thursday.
Yes, Tax Thursday. Welcome back. The paper presentation and the ensuing discussions were followed by a robust question and answer session.
Some of the innovations you introduced is the issue of ETC. But I can tell you that it is slowing down the process. When you apply for tax grant certificate now, you are not sure of getting it until 5-6 months. Even when the clients are paid, I want you to look into that. Then offer centralization of the issuance of tax grant certificate. Now, state coordinators are the one now approving the issue of tax grant certificate instead of, tax controllers. Why is that? Then last but not the least is on the issue of unutilized withholding tax credits. We now ask our clients to apply to Abuja before they can utilize, withholding tax credits. Are you doubting the withholding tax receipts you issued?
Mr. Fowler, one of the things I expect you to implement quickly is tax refund from your office when people have overpaid.
If a taxpayer is aggrieved, or the tax authority normally go to either the appeal tribunal or the courts. My question is, at what point can the FIRS go and lock up the business premises or seize or freeze the accounts of corporate organizations. What are the processes involved? And if these processes exist, is it not supposed to be publicized so that all the taxpayers know about it uphand? Not that we use the situation where, like I would say, like the police will do, they will wait behind. When you commit the crime, they come out and arrest you. Why don't we just publicize it first, so that when we know, if you know it and somebody commits that, then we have informed them. Thank you.
In those days, we used to have tax being assessed on yearly basis. But what I observe now with the self-assessment, you don't look into what has happened until other 6 years. You start with the tax audit. And tax audit, you go back 6 years. Time is of essence. So I'm suggesting, instead of 6 years before you do your tax audit, I know you have this staff strength now. You are recruiting staff. Again, I have to congratulate you for that. Quite a number of chartered accountants are now working in the Federal Inland Revenue. That's the right step in the right direction. So the issue of not until 5 or 6 years before you do tax audit is not an ideal situation. Then the issue of penalty. For instance, if somebody, at times the banks are not even ready. Even when the banks are ready, they can tell you there is no network and so on and so forth. If you are late by 1 week or by the weekend, you couldn't pay, and your staff will still insist that for the 1 day, because of the bank problem or no answer, you still have to pay the penalty. I think something ought to be done about that.
We had experience of withholding taxes taken from our small revenues. Then we used to offset our tax. But then there was the issue of penalties. And I was told we have to go and bring cash when there's still some surplus on the withholding tax credit. Why should the government be owing me and I'll go and look for money to pay government? Yes. They should be able to remove whatever liability any taxpayer has from whatever money he has with the Inland Revenue.
The first question is on filing. When we go to bank to file our returns, maybe like VAT or any other taxes, the banks usually, even most of the times, except we go very early in the morning, like 8 o'clock, which we have to be in our offices. They think they'll tell you there is no service. And when you leave the file there, maybe the teller and other things, for them to work on and come back, maybe later in the day, they might say, oh, there is still no service. And when I come back the next day, I will still come and fill another teller. They will tell me, oh, when the FIRS come for their audits, especially these FIRS precisely, the issue is that when they see another date, maybe a previous date, not that same date, no, they can't work on it, that they will be fined or penalized for something like that.
Mr. Fowler rose to the occasion.
Thank you. And distinguished ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your questions. The first question was the e-solutions slowing down the process. What we have done is that in our branches, we have got at least 2 computers ready and available to any taxpayer who needs guidance on the e-solutions. We also have the opportunity to taxpayers to also use the manual process. So in any time of change, sometimes there might be a slowdown, but eventually you'll find out that the e-solutions are much more convenient and quicker. In terms of the over-centralization of the issuance of tax certificates, it should not take more than 2 weeks for anyone to get a tax clearance certificate. We also publicized in the newspapers that if it's beyond 2 weeks, you should contact the Director of Efficiency and also my SAICT. If you do the manual process and within 2 weeks you do not get your tax clearance certificate, please let either of these gentlemen know. So please bear with us. We wanted to make sure that people who get a tax clearance certificate get a proper tax clearance certificate. In terms of the tax refund, prior to now, we used to have 2 billion allocated to FIRS for the payment of tax refunds, and I'm sure that all large corporate accounts, banks, and others who were entitled to tax refunds were being paid. The tax refund also applies at the state level. I'm also the chairman of the Joint Tax Board, but I can tell you that when it gets to the state level, I cannot confirm that you will get a tax refund in cash. I do know that some states will give you a tax credit. But if you have a situation where a state internal revenue service does not process either, please make a report to the Joint Tax Board and we'll take it up. In terms of the tax credits you have, from the FIRS, we have uploaded our system from 2012 to date. So if you have any outstanding tax credits you want to use to offset current taxes, you're free to do so. You can actually download those receipts by yourself on your own system. In terms of our aggrieved taxpayers, by law, you do have the right to object. Once you object and it is reviewed, and I'll first of all talk about the FIRS, we go through various reconciliation meetings until your liability becomes final, and at that point, we engage in discussions, and on an average, it takes us 1 year on an average before we go to sealing up a business. For us, every business that we close down stops production, which means they stop earning money. And once they stop earning money, they stop paying taxes. So it's not in our interest to stop any business from continuing on their business, because we know we should get additional tax. I'd also like to salute our father, the High Chief, and also tell you that we agree with you totally that doing a 6-year audit is too long. We're currently at 3 years, but what we did find out, sir, is that when we looked at the self-assessments, most of them were not transparent, they were not correct. And so we started off with a 6-year audit. We're now at a 3-year period. The next audit that we're starting right now is for a maximum of 3 years. And we believe that we'll be at a maximum of 2 years by the next audit period, which should be in 2019. However, we believe that once we can establish a trend for those taxpayers that have been seen to be compliant, we'll allow them to do a self-audit, and we'll only do an audit as required, based on our risk analysis. In terms of the payment for late returns, whereby payments are made 1 week late or 2 weeks late, I can say here, at least until next year, we will waive all such penalties for any payments that is at least or at most 1 week old. Basically, that would come under administrative issues. And as we move more into technology, I believe that will be a thing of the past. In terms of withholding tax used to offset taxes and the request for a cash payment, that is not required. If you have adequate withholding tax credit notes, you do not have to make any other payment. The issue of filing VAT and systems breakdowns from the bank, and that's why I have the Director of Efficiency here and the SA ICT to my office here. Anytime with technology, there could be a disruption of business. But please let us know. We also have people that monitor this on a daily basis, but anytime it does happen, please let us know.
We close with this parting shot.
People who preside over taxpayers' money must themselves pay the right amount of tax and on time. We are in election season now. We all, including tax authorities and those of us who are taxpayers, must insist that lawmakers, people who want to be governors, people who want to be president, vice president, and all of that, must pay the right amount of tax at the right time. And I'm sure that if you do that, you actually screen out a lot of indecent people, because you need to be decent to pay tax and pay it on time.
Thank you for watching.
See you next week.